Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of The Curtain and the Cross.
Was this
Matthew's
a country podcast now?
See, you know what this shows me? This shows me that my good friend Matthew, who's on the episode with us, does not listen to the show. I think that's what that tells me right there.
Yeah, I have yet to listen to an episode. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. A little background homework would have been nice, but that's
Yeah.
fine. So the joke is that I feel like our title for the show sounds like a country song.
It
And
does.
so now I feel like I have to sing it every time I introduce the show.
And if I had done my research, I would have realized that. That is my fault.
No, it's totally fine. So, listeners, you hear my friend Matthew Jackson is joining us for this episode today. And of course, as always, I have my good friend Grace.
Hello.
Grace, how are you doing?
I am fabulous, Nathan, and I'm so excited to be able to talk with you and your good friend Matthew today. So it's going to be a good episode.
Yes. So Grace and I discussed in our first episode and a little bit in our second episode how we started off like deep dived in the world of theater, and we felt that we needed to step away, and we kind of discussed a little bit of the reasons why. And it was mostly because we felt like for ourselves personally, it was very hard to balance the theater world and our faith. And we had talked about how we know some people who know how to do both, know how to balance their personal faith in Christ and doing theater. And Matthew Jackson is one of those people. I am super excited to talk to him. He and I, we kind of admitted to each other the other day that he and I have done shows together. We've formed this friendship, but we had rarely talked to each other about our faith. And it kind of made me sad. I'm not going to lie. It made me sad that we hadn't talked about our faith with each other. So I'm really excited for him to be on this episode. So Matthew, I kind of already introduced you, but you can give yourself a little bit of a better introduction. So take it away, my friend.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Matthew. I'm an actor, a writer, comedian, voiceover artist, and hopefully, and now podcaster, apparently. Hopefully I will be doing my own podcast very, very shortly here, but that's another discussion. I'm based in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And as Nathan said, yeah, we got to know each other doing some Sweet Tea Shakespeare together. That was really fun. And I just remember thinking how when you were playing Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream, a dream role of mine, I figured, man, I can't even be jealous of that role because he's doing it so perfectly. I don't even want that role because nobody could be doing it better than Nathan is doing it right now. So that was my first impression of you, Nathan.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, obviously, is you are also a fantastic actor yourself.
Oh,
but just until recently, I didn't fully understand your walk with Christ. So if you're comfortable sharing I guess we would call it your testimony or your walk with Christ. I mean, if you would like to give that little background of yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I was raised in the church. I was raised a Presbyterian, but I've always identified as basically anything Protestant. So when I grew up, I went to a Presbyterian church. Since then, I've attended Anglican churches, Lutheran churches, Methodist churches. I currently reside now in another Presbyterian church. So I could basically just call myself a Presbyterian and skip all that mumbo jumbo. But yeah, I was raised in the church. Had a pretty strong calling towards the acting vocation, and this was an interesting story here. It was my freshman year of college, and I'm visiting my parents back home, and I remember sitting down with my dad. We went out to breakfast together, and he said, "So, what are you going to major in?" I was like, "Oh, probably English." He's like, Why do you want to do that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I was figuring I was going to go be a high school English teacher, raise a couple of kids, and do what I know." And he's like, "Okay, you don't sound very excited about that." I was like, "No, it's just I don't know what else to do." He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I want to be an actor, but feel like the world could use more teachers." He's like, "Well, you're not wrong about that, but I think the world could use more Christian actors." And then after that, I was like, "Sold. Okay, like that. Say less." That was, um, and so I went back to school. It was my freshman year of university, and I went back to school with a brand new mindset of, okay, now what does that mean to be a Christian actor? And I don't just do Christian stories, but it's like I'm a actor who happens to be Christian. So yeah, I guess that's a brief little summary there.
So I guess that leads me to the question that you basically just presented.
Oh,
What does it mean to be a Christian actor? Because Grace and I discussed before that we felt that we weren't at a place, I guess, where we could balance that. And I know you and I have done shows with Sweet Tea, you mentioned before, and it got to a point for me, and we had briefly discussed this. It had gotten to a point to me where, for some reason, I can't explain it, I still can't, that I just felt like I didn't belong in that
mm,
environment
yeah.
anymore. So, how do you find the ability to balance both your faith and being an actor? Or do you think you have to do that?
No, I do think it's a balancing act, and I think it's uh to forgive the pun, a balancing act because we're all actors, but it's it's not something I've honestly struggled that much with because yes, being around theater people and the theater industry itself is by nature pushing boundaries and always trying to be on the edge of culture and is much more liberal and loose and wanting to bend norms. And that's always been fine with me because I have always known who I am and who I am in Christ, and and not everything in theater has to be for me. My job as an actor is to come in and to tell my story and to tell the story with the people around me. And my job isn't to judge. And if there are things that are happening around me that I don't approve of, I don't have to participate in that. But I'm not there to be like, oh, these people are going to hell or nah, 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 nah. It's like, that's not my job. My job is to love them and to maybe show them a different way.
I love that because in your like job, you may be just by showing them the love, the only Christ someone sees, and like taking that just through your way you act with them probably is God enough without shoving it down their throat and be like, hey, you need to be a Christian. It's just like by your example.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, what we're coming to the conclusion is that Grace and I are just two judgmental jerks who can't hold their tongue, and that's why we backed away from them. I'm just
Mine was I could not participate in the things. At the time in my life I was at, I was going in the wrong path. And I was like, I have to focus on I was not strong enough in my faith where I could, like you said, just not participate in some of those things because I wanted to be a part of everything. So
I also think too that there's like some schools of thought in the acting world about like how you have to be so extreme or you have to do certain things, that I was like, if I ever get to the point of my career where I am sacrificing being a good person to be a good actor, then it is time for me to step away from acting. Like if whatever work I am doing as an actor is having if whatever work I'm doing as an actor is coming at the detriment of my soul, then it is not worth it to me anymore. Then I need to be doing something else. It is time for me to hang up my boots and say it was fun while it lasted. But I think these things are not mutually exclusive. We can be God-centered actors and tell stories that aren't God-centered. Like we can tell stories that are important and that need to be told, and that we are uh, just representing ourselves in our own little circle and our own little spheres.
So are you of the mindset that you can find God's truth in almost anything?
Yeah, I think that there's like obviously there were always trying to be people trying to push back against that and like, okay, find God in this. I'm like, well, that's not worth our time. In a good faith argument, I think there could be God can be found anywhere. Like if it's in good faith, there's some people acting in bad faith who will try to present you with an argument like, okay, find God in this, and then obviously present you with something that is completely devoid of anything holy. But if it taking you at your word of like in a good faith argument, yeah, I think there's some goodness to be found in anything.
Yeah, and I've gotten to that place too, which is one of the reasons why I kind of left the Christian school that I was at, because I got to a point where I was wanting to do shows that weren't overtly Christian, but had that message in there somewhere. Because I believe that and this is something that Grace has quoted me, even though it's not a direct quote from me, that we were created to be creative. And no matter what that means, what that looks like, if it's not like what you said, if it's not to the detriment of someone's soul, then I believe that God is behind it. And
Yeah.
so what are some things, and you kind of touched on this already, but what are some things that you would tell someone like me or Grace who feel that want and that pull to perform, but we just don't see how we can and how we can justify performing and also professing to be Christ followers?
Well, I would say look at the story what is the story you were trying to tell? Is part of the whole, like what production are you a part of? What character are you playing? What story are you telling? And then what story are you bringing to your character? Like any character I play is going to have the Matthew angle, because there's just no other way to do it. I think Johnny Depp was the one who said that if you don't bring some part of yourself to your acting, it's not acting, it's lying. So you always have to bring something of yourself to that story, and that can be the joy and the receptivity that you're receiving from other people, like a give and a take. But I would just say, like, yeah, what is it uniquely you that is that only you can bring, that nobody else would bring to that room?
Yeah, which kind of worries me that I played characters like John Falstaff and Nick Bottom, and I was able to bring a little bit of my conceitedness myself to that character, and the the desperation of because John Falstaff is a character that when I see him, he's just desperate for companionship.
Yeah.
And if that isn't me when I first started out in Fayetteville theater, I don't know what is. So that's definitely a side of
Bring some truth
myself,
to it. Yeah.
you know. And I think, I mean, going back to at least my reason for getting out of the theater world. I hate to say it like that, like I was getting out of something, but it was mostly because, and Grace kind of touched on this. I wasn't in a place in my faith where it wasn't so much that I was having to justify being a Christian in the theater world, but it was more so like holding on to my faith in the theater world, if that makes sense. Like
Mm.
I was such in a place that I was so desperate for companionship and friendship that I thrived off of that want and need so much that I guess we could say that theater became like an idol to me.
Mm.
Like I
Interesting.
needed theater for verification. I needed theater to have friends. I needed theater for this and for that. So have you ever found, I mean, it sounds like you're at a really good place, Matthew, doing theater and so grounded in your faith. But have you ever found yourself like in that kind of, why am I doing theater? Is there a hidden idolatry reason while I'm doing it, or have you always been like, no, this is what I feel God has called me to do?
Yeah, I would say the latter. It is. I feel like God has put me on this earth to tell stories, whether that's through theater, film, TV, stand-up comedy, my writing, my audiobooks, whatever it is. I'm on this earth to tell stories. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a prophet. I am not a pastor. I am a storyteller. And one of that is through the craft of acting, where you become another person to tell a story. So I guess I've never really had that problem where theater has become my idol. But I also think of it as my life as a vegetarian as well. That like I don't judge other people who eat meat, but and so like there are things in theater and things in the acting world that are not for me, and people that I'm like, okay, yeah, if you want to go full method and you want to take your role that seriously, that's fine for you. That is not fine for me. I would not feel comfortable doing that. But just because I am a vegetarian, I do not need to put my vegetarian beliefs on you as an actor and make you feel bad about the meat that you're eating, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Um, so you have dabbled in teaching a little bit.
I
You've
have, yeah.
done, yeah, you've done some theater camps, you've done some improv camps. So how do you, because Grace and I are both theater teachers. I teach
Mm,
elementary, she teaches high school. And
okay.
you've worked with all ages, haven't you? Like
I
kids and
have.
adults.
Yeah, yeah, kindergarten up through adulthood. And in fact, I spent a year in South Africa teaching for that whole year. That was after college, and that was kind of when I realized I didn't want to be a teacher full time. Like I spent that year as learning that I was like, yeah, I'm not a teacher. That is not my primary calling. My calling is to tell stories and not to teach. That's another distinction that God has given me. Is like, yeah, you're not primarily a teacher, but you do it on the side, and that's fine. So I teach kind of once or twice a year, 8 week classes, um, 8 week long classes was what I was trying to say. I teach mostly improvisation, and in the past I've taught acting and speech and other stuff. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of my background there.
So Grace and I both teach in the public school system. You
Okay,
kind of do, it's kind of public school system kind of stuff that you do because it's not a Christian organization.
right.
But how do you, when you teach whatever age student, do you find yourself trying to implement aspects of your faith in your teaching, or do you see it just strictly as, I'm here to teach improv, I'm here to teach acting, or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say I'm not there to evangelize. That's not the time or the place. I'm not trying to convert anybody to my religion. I'm there to be an example of what an improviser or an actor or whatever it is I'm teaching. Um, and then if they learn afterwards, like, oh yeah, he's a Christian too. How can he be a Christian and an actor at the same time? It's like, great. I'm happy to have that discussion, but um, but I'm not there to. That's really not the time or the place for me to do any proselytizing. So yeah.
Right. I think kind of what I was going for is like what you just said. Like being that example and being that example of Christ, because yes, you can't openly talk to people about your faith,
Yeah,
and
live it,
obviously,
don't show it.
yeah, 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 you might get in trouble for that, just a
Yeah.
little bit. But yeah, I mean, like I used to say when I was first teaching, like I see my class as a ministry. Like that is my ministry. That is where God has placed me. That is where God has called me to be in the moment. And yes, I can't openly talk about my faith, but I can be a shining light to the students that God has placed in my care and in that time. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of where I was going for. Um, Grace,
That
go
kind
ahead.
of, sorry, it just makes me think of, I think it was Saint Francis, one of them, that was like, you need to preach the gospel at all times and when necessary, use words. And I feel like just through teaching, through just like living for Christ through your actions is enough of the gospel that you don't have to say anything. So I love that.
Yeah.
So Matthew, do you have anything coming up? Any projects? Any voiceover audio books? Because you do
Yeah,
everything. So
actually recording a book that my dad did is a guide to discovering God's will. And so it's a Christian book that I'll be getting to in the next couple of weeks here. I'm also proofreading a new manuscript that hasn't even come out yet, so that's exciting too. So my dad has written several books for the Christian faith, and yeah, I got an audiobook coming up, and yeah, just auditioning my way through, doing some stand-up comedy gigs here and there, and yeah, keeping busy.
so if anybody wants to follow your acting journey, how
Oh
can they
yeah,
do that?
that would be great. And Matthew Stuart Jackson on Instagram or Blue Sky. I'm at Matt Jack Laughs, and um, yeah, Facebook as well, Matthew Stuart Jackson. I go by my full name because there are too many Matthew Jacksons out there. So yeah, thank you very much
Well,
for that plug.
Matthew, you're amazing. You're one of my best friends, and
Uh,
I consider myself blessed to know you and to be able to say that I've been on the stage with you, so I know how good you are. And so
Thank you.
thank
Right
you.
back at you. Feeling is
Well,
mutual.
thank you. I appreciate it. But thank you for coming on the show. And
Absolutely.
this is The Curtain and the Cross with Nathan and
Grace.
signing out.